All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that basically takes a picture-perfect dream and flips it into an absolute nightmare. We're looking at Advent and Sanvi. So these two had been together for 4 years and were finally tying the knot. They decided on a gorgeous destination wedding in Cherrapunji, specifically in June because that heavy monsoon rain just makes the natural beauty there look incredible. But, as you'll soon see, what was supposed to be the best week of their lives rapidly turns into a descent into pure, unimaginable terror. To really wrap our heads around the dread in this story, I want to drop you right into one of the most terrifying moments of their trip. Picture this. Sanvi is sitting on the bus, completely normal ride, just trying to calm her pre-wedding nerves by listening to some music through her earphones. But then, the music gets interrupted by this weird, static-like whispering. It builds up until a horrifying, raspy voice speaks directly into her ear, saying, "I won't leave you alive." This single moment actually caused Sanvi to scream so loudly that the driver panicked and crashed the bus right into a tree. And honestly, it sets the tone for everything that comes next.
Now, this obviously introduces a massive amount of psychological tension. If we rewind just a little bit to the start of this bus ride from Guwahati, Sanvi was already feeling a serious creeping unease. Why? Because sitting way in the back seat was a woman completely hidden under a veil. Sanvi just couldn't stop looking back at her, and every single time she did, this veiled woman would start chanting mantras and flashing this deeply unsettling smile. So we have to ask ourselves, is there an actual supernatural threat here, or is Sanvi just dealing with extreme, sleep-deprived anxiety? Well, the answer becomes pretty clear when the bus pulls over at a roadside dhaba to grab some tea. Advayat hops off the bus for a minute while Sanvi is kind of dozing off. When she opens her eyes, that veiled woman is no longer in the back. She is sitting right next to Sanvi. And the veil is shifted just enough to reveal a horrifying, half-cut face. Before Sanvi can even process what's happening or try to run, the woman violently grabs her hand. The sheer panic completely paralyzes Sanvi. She is trying so desperately to scream for help, but literally no sound comes out.
And this, right here, perfectly captures the tragic dynamic between our two main subjects. When Advait finally gets back with the tea, he finds Sanvi hyperventilating, just terrified. But when she opens her eyes again, the woman is back in the last seat. Sanvi tries to tell herself it was just a bad dream. Advait, on the other hand, sees absolutely nothing wrong. To him, the bus is totally empty except for them and the driver. He completely rationalizes the whole thing, figuring her massive panic attack is just the result of travel exhaustion and the stress of planning a huge wedding.
It's really crucial to understand that these weren't just random, isolated incidents. There is a very clear timeline of escalation. On day 1, in the morning, we have the bus ride. By the afternoon of day 1, there's a cliffside appearance. And by the evening of day 3, we hit the cursed Mendi burn. The entity is very systematically closing in. Let's talk about that afternoon cliffside encounter because, wow, the imagery is just pure nightmare fuel. Right after the bus crash, standing out in the pouring rain, Sanvi spots that same woman standing on the edge of a nearby cliff. But this time, she is fully dressed in bridal attire. As Sanvi takes a step toward her, the woman's head spins completely backward, like a full unnatural rotation, and she locks those terrifying eyes directly onto Sanvi. And then she just hurls herself backwards off the mountain cliff and into the ravine. The really tragic point here is how Advait's reactions just keep isolating Sanvi. I mean, even after she screams that a woman literally just jumped off a cliff, Advait is completely baffled. Because from his perspective, there was no woman on the bus, and there sure isn't one on the cliff. When they finally make it to the resort, he sits her down and basically diagnoses her with hallucinations from exhaustion and stress. You know, his explanations are completely logical, but they are tragically flawed, leaving Sanvi entirely alone with this terror. Fast forward 2 days to the Mehendi ceremony. Normally, this is a joyful, musical event, surrounded by your favorite people. The atmosphere is vibrant, and for a brief moment, Sanvi is actually smiling, kind of hoping the worst is behind her. But that joy gets shattered almost instantly. As she sits down to get her henna applied, things take a very dark turn. The supernatural threat goes from psychological right to dangerously physical. Sanvi suddenly feels this intense, searing burn on her hands. Wherever the Mendi artist touches her, these deep red wounds start opening up on her skin. She tries to yank her hands back, but the artist has this unnatural iron grip on her, just continuing to apply the paste like nothing is happening. When Sanvi finally looks up at the artist's face, she realizes with absolute horror that it's the woman from the bus. The shock is so overwhelming that she faints right on the spot.
When she comes to, her head is in Advait's lap, and her family is crowding around. Her hands are visibly covered in these awful wounds. The Mendi is ruined. But listen to Advait's response. He says it's just a Mendi allergy. Medicine will fix it. This is just devastating for Sanvi. At this exact moment, she knows definitively that this entity is actively trying to stop the wedding. And worse, she knows with absolute certainty that no one is going to believe her. Which brings us to the climax on the morning of the wedding. It's an incredibly cinematic, atmospheric setup. The mandap, the altar, is inside the resort's banquet hall, featuring these massive glass windows looking out over the valley, which is just getting hammered by the monsoon rain. Suddenly, the power cuts out completely. The entire hall is pitched into darkness, and the only light left is the eerie, flickering glow of the holy fire from the Havan Kund. The events that follow happen incredibly fast. First, the power goes out. Then, Sanvi looks up and sees the ghost in full red bridal gear sitting right behind Advait, actually holding his hand. Advait is completely clueless. When the priest asks him to perform a ritual, Advait realizes he's paralyzed. He starts convulsing violently, and then the spirit strikes. She snaps his neck with so much force that he dies instantly. Before anyone can even react, she grabs Sanvi by the throat and drags her straight out the shattered window and into the ravine. The visual chaos of this moment is gripping. Just before that fatal blow, every single large glass window in the hall shatters inward all at once. And for the first time, the ghost reveals her unhidden face to the whole room. It's deeply scarred, covered in wounds, and her eyes are glowing this terrifying, blood-red color. It's just a massive display of supernatural rage that leaves the entire wedding party frozen in shock. Instantly, this celebration of love turns into a scene of deep mourning. Advait is gone, and Sanvi is missing. But this brings up a really important question, shifting us from frantic horror into somewhat of a somber mystery. Why them? Was this couple specifically targeted for some reason, or were they literally just in the wrong place at the worst possible time? The family is devastated, desperately looking for answers while the search for Sanvi begins. The answer actually comes from an old man from a nearby village who shares a chilling piece of local folklore. Decades ago, way before this resort was a thing, a young woman lived on this very mountain slope. On her wedding day, her own husband pushed her down into the ravine, murdering her. According to the legend, her tormented spirit got bound to that exact spot. She is deeply cursed and violently determined to stop anyone else from ever getting married there. If you make it to the mandap, she claims your life. Which brings us to the number one. You're probably wondering, how on earth could a commercial resort operate with a deadly curse on the property? Well, the horrific irony here is that Advait and Sanvi's wedding was the very first wedding ever hosted at this place. Since it was a brand new resort, the management and staff were completely oblivious to the local lore and the dark history of the ground they built on. 2 agonizing weeks later, the search teams finally find Sanvi's body in the jungle at the bottom of the ravine. But it's the condition they found her in that really sticks with you. The Mangal Sutra, her sacred wedding necklace, was wrapped so tightly around her throat that it was deeply embedded, as if she had been violently strangled by the very symbol of her marriage. It's a dark, super unsettling end that really forces us to ask, does local folklore carry a weight and power that our modern logic just can't explain away? What do you take away from this tragic collision of love, logic, and ancient curses?